Welcome to season 11 of How to Start Up, the podcast helping you start and scale your business with advice from entrepreneurs on what to do now, next, or never. This season we'll be hearing about all things productivity from amazing entrepreneurs sharing how they've hacked theirs. Hosted by me, Juliet Fallowfield, founder of the B Corp certified PR communications and podcasting consultancy, Fallowfield & Mason. Our mission is to enable you to master your own storytelling, whether that be via PR or podcasting, all with a long-term view. The Department of Education found in 2022 that 63% of UK adults hold multiple roles, demonstrating the extensiveness of the portfolio career. However, how do you create multiple roles for yourself and, more importantly, ensure that you deliver across all of them? To answer this, I wanted to hear from an experienced portfolio career holder who manages several roles at once. As an M&A growth expert, angel investor and advocate for inclusive leaders, Nnenna Onuba founded her first business, LBB Skin, in 2018. And she has since built a mergers and acquisitions consultancy and the leadership and inclusion advocacy organisation 100 Allies. Nnenna also holds directorships with organisations including the British Beauty Council and the Royal Veterinary College. Keep listening to hear Nnenna's advice on how you separate your different roles and effectively balance competing demands on your time. It's wonderful to have you on How to Start Up today. We're going to talk all around productivity, which I know can be a blessing and a curse. But before we get into that, it would be wonderful if you could introduce a little bit about yourself and your business background.
Fantastic. I'm pleased to be here. My name is Nnenna Onuba, and I wear a lot of different hats, but I'm going to keep it tight today. I'm a beauty founder. I'm an M&A and strategic growth advisor. I'm an angel investor. I sit on a few non-exec boards, including the British Beauty Council, Royal Veterinary College, and Cheltenham Ladies School. And I'm continually discovering more and more about myself. So
amazing. Well, congratulations, first off, because that's an impressive list. And your LinkedIn is something to behold. Today, we really want to talk about portfolio careers, because I think a lot of people, especially coming out of the pandemic, see another way of working and living. And the fact that you don't have to just sell your soul to one business for life anymore in any shape or form. For you, when we were talking to you about coming on the podcast, we wanted to talk about productivity. And I've had a lot of pushback from people going, that shouldn't be celebrated. It's not something that should be heroed, busy fool. And you came back saying, I'd love to talk about portfolio career. So how would you define a portfolio career?
That's a good question. Look, for me, it's about making space to really do multiple things, because we're not one thing. Or at least I realize that I'm not one thing. I have different interests, but I also have some skills. So my starting point for me is like my passion, right? And then lead from there. So I start with my passion. I haven't done this for very long. I see I've done it for 6 years, so I'm still figuring it out myself. And prior to that, I did a certain thing for about 15 years. I think in that sort of very straight career platform, I discovered a lot of things, or I understood a lot of things about myself. And I think one of them is I realized that actually, if I'm really passionate about something, I do an incredible job. And my personality type is that I will apply myself. And so I thought, look, I have evidence from my historic career where I did work, not necessarily on things I cared a lot about, and I was extremely productive at it. And so I guess in this portfolio world, I was like, what could it look like if I actually went after things I have a lot of passion about, but I'm still using the skills that I'm quite comfortable and confident I have? Wouldn't it be so much more amazing? So that's really how the journey started, and it keeps evolving.
I bet it does. There's never a dull moment. And I feel like I've sort of really conflicted, because a lot of people are telling me niche down, be a specialist in one thing and do that really well, and you become known for that. But my brain is telling me, I love communications, I love podcasting, I love mentoring, and being self-employed, because it's not about the money. It is about keeping my brain happy, and I'm learning more and I'm challenging myself. How do you balance out that becoming successful from a revenue perspective versus maybe spreading yourself too thinly? And then the other part to that is time, but we'll come on to that in a minute. It's really hard, isn't it?
It is really hard.
Do you feel that actually, as long as you're fulfilled and you're doing right by the work that you're doing, that's fine by you? And if some people think that you're spread too thinly, or, I mean, the expression is a jack of all trade, a master of none. It's like, well, I know I can be a master at being a mentor, and I can be a master at communication. So how does that sit with you?
So for me, one of the things, again, like I'm 44, right? So I have a lot of evidence behind me about who I am and what I like and et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of evidence tells me I'm a really, focused. So what I've started to really focus on is managing my energy. I have core skills. So even though it seems I'm adding all of these things, it's still building on some fundamentals, right? I'm really good at finance and business. That is where my expertise lies. There are other things I keep learning, right? Entrepreneurship, building a business, etc. And because I'm also very curious, and I think this education piece and the dynamic environment are things that I know I really enjoy. All of my work has always had that element. So when I think about it in that way, even though it seems like I'm doing different things, I'm not actually straying too far from that foundation. And when I think about my work as well, so niching down, I agree, right? Like you have to have skills that you're expert at because that is what you can transact with. People pay for expertise. No one's paying for someone to be wishy-washy. Anyone can go to in ChatGPT days, right? You can be an
Yeah.
expert really quickly. So again, you need to know your thing. So I think those things matter, having like a core base. But that portfolio career living is about leaving some flexibility to still discover, because as human beings, we're constantly growing,
Mm.
challenging ourselves, evolving, and also the environment we're in is evolving. I
And they
think
all feed each other, presumably, as well. Like you're learning all the time from these sort of Venn diagram is real. Have you found that gives you ideas to bring back to other parts of the business?
absolutely. And there are, even though I have wrappers, big wrappers, right? The two big circles are finance and business, right? M&A, selling businesses. And then the other wrapper that exists today is beauty. So even though I have different hats and I shape shift, every conversation, when I'm being a mentor to a founder I've invested in, I'm learning from them as much as I'm advising. When I'm selling a business from an entrepreneur who has achieved so much that, this is the ultimate exit, right? That every entrepreneur dreams of. I'm learning so much as well in understanding the business about how it was built and how to be an entrepreneur. When I sit on the board of the British Beauty Council, we're looking from a more holistic perspective, but there's a lot of evidence and research in terms of being able to articulate the value of that industry that feeds into all the other work. So it's a little bit connected. And so again, that's why I said there are big circles so that I don't veer too far out. And let's look at my work, for example, my non-exec work. So one of the things I realized, and I think it's important to understand because there's a lot of logic to how my portfolio career came about. I came into beauty as a founder, right? So I knew I was going to be dealing with really small businesses, at least for a while in the beginning. And I was like, but I have all this expertise. It's about big business. And I was like, I'll be remiss to discard that. And so actually taking on these non-exec roles, where also I'm exposed to different types of people who think differently and bigger organizations was a way of keeping that relevant, but in a new sector. So again, I'm still learning. And the mishmash, I mean, gosh, this is my power, is that I've been exposed to so many different types of businesses, so many experienced people who I learn from constantly. And I keep evolving. It really excites me.
And your mental Rolodex of, I think we're quite similar in that way, that dot connecting exercise. Like, well, that person over there is an email marketing expert, and this person over here has got a beauty brand that needs email marketing, and da 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 da. It's sort of feeding all that time. And we're both talking a lot with our hands. And that, when you said the word energy, it really resonated because that's what gets me excited. That's where I get in that flow state and that abnormal profit, that extra bit that's just more than just doing the work. What does energy mean to you?
When I say it's everything, it really is everything. Because I realize, I'm sure everybody has experienced this, right? Where you have a bit of work and it's taking you a long time to do it. Really, it just doesn't feel natural. One of the things I realized, and that's what the portfolio bit allows me to do, because I have choice. And I'm an entrepreneur, so a lot of things I'm doing, I'm driving as opposed to it being pushed on me. Of course, some stuff is pushed on me because you have teams, etc., right, that you're accountable to. So one of the things with my energy is I've learned systems about how I work. For example, I'm extremely productive at the start of the day. I was like, oh God, how can I wake up earlier so I can capture more of that hyper productive time? And so I do all the hard things, all the strategic, all the creative work has to happen at the beginning of the day. And then the rest of the day, starts to shift, right? I'm not saying it's always that way. Of course, I can find creative and productive moments. I'm saying optimums, right? So I've hacked it in that way. So the rest of my day will be more chatting, going out, having meetings, etc., or switching to more administrative tasks. And sometimes I also find when I come with high energy, I'm the most creative. That's things happen quickly. My younger version of myself defined it as, oh, I definitely work under pressure. So I need to, I was like a
Yes.
lastminute.com type person.
We were taught that that was good and that you should learn to be under pressure at all times and then you're productive. And it's like, it's not healthy.
Exactly. I mean, there is a fine mix, right? It's that understanding of you and how you perform, and actually how you then use that to create something that's a little bit balanced. So I left investment banking because I didn't want to work in that almost constant state of pressure, because actually I was like that stress, that's lizard brain type thing. When I'm relaxed, I'm in my natural flow, everything feels easier. I'm my most creative. I enjoy my work. My conversations are much more organic, and I'm my best self. So I just almost constantly trying to achieve that type situation.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people said you're either lark or an owl. I'm like, I might be both. And that's not good either. But when you're doing something you love, you want to do it more. And in that flow state where you've got that good energy coming through and that you're feeling like you're firing on all cylinders, it's satisfying. You get job satisfaction.
I'm going to add one thing to that, because again, it's back to this: we are not one thing, and we evolve also as individuals. So I, for sure, in my younger, early working years, my 20s and probably early 30s, I was much more an evening person. Like you could not, like my day, we worked long hours. And so like, I'm not really a human being until about 11 a.m. And then I would go late into the night. I don't know when the flip happened, but it happened.
So it changed for me when I moved to Australia and I started going for runs at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was like, I have to go to bed at 10. It's not an option. I
You
flipped
see,
then.
I've always exercised. So in fact,
Oh,
my gym session happened at the end of the traditional workday, right? So we were done with meetings, clients had shut down their computers, and we were about to do the real shift. And then I would go to the gym then, and then come back a little bit rejuvenated and do like my final bits of quiet work. And so almost what I described in the morning happened for me in this awkward, really late evening hour. And it just, again, I don't know, it just shifted at some point. But I think actually it might have been when I left corporate and started to sort of flow more naturally with my energy. I love to wake up. I'm really weird. I love to be outside. I really look forward to hearing the birds chirping away in the morning. And I only seem to hear that really, really early before the day starts. And I think maybe that's where it started from. I've never really thought about it.
I think you've tapped into the circadian rhythms. I had a fascinating conversation with Dr. Russell Foster that's written a book about sleep and how we're on a sort of 24-hour clock, but not all of us are 24 hours and not all of us need 7 hours or 8 hours. You could be a 3-hour sleeper, you could be a 12-hour sleeper, just work out what you need without an alarm and you're good. But every single guest on the podcast has said you've got to know yourself to be a good founder. And the fact that if you know yourself and how you work and what matters to you, you'll do better by your team, better by your clients, and better by yourself. And you have that autonomy. And people are like, oh, you can take endless holidays. It's like, that's not the autonomy we're talking about. It's I can choose to work in a way that works for me, which means that everyone else will benefit as well, you hope. And I think I very much struggle. I mean, I'm early doors in this, but I was like, I'll just keep working. I'll just work and work and work harder, harder, harder. I'll be more productive. I keep saying that in inverted commas, produce more, and therefore it will benefit. And I burnt myself out. I was exhausted. I wasn't sleeping properly. I gave up exercise. I gave up meditation. And I know that you mentioned the book Ikigai, and I was given it a couple of years ago. And it's the only book I've read more than once. And I've underlined it and I've given it to friends. And I absolutely bloody love it. It's incredible. What did that book do for you? Did it shift any mindsets?
Absolutely. Like, I don't know what you call that category. I call them the growth book. And I've been on a little bit of journey. So something you said really resonated, which is actually self-mastery, I think is the absolute power. If there's anything people should focus on the most in their lives, is if you can understand who you are, I think you have a lot more control, because you can tell people your story, you can tell people your narrative. And actually, a lot of the complexities that I think we find in interaction is actually that lack of understanding. And I guess it's what we also call confidence today, right? Because no, your narrative is not my narrative. This is mine, and that is essentially what it is. So with Ikigai, what I really liked about that, and again, the move about 6 years ago for me was, not organic. It was extremely intentional. And I realized that I had proven a lot of things about who I could be in my career and achievements, etc., etc. And one of the things I realized was important to me was meaning, purpose, etc. And so that book for me, what I loved about it is it started to help me understand, right, and almost work towards something, which my ultimate goal in my work life, because work will always be important to me. I'm probably borderline a workaholic on some level, right? And so I was like, my ultimate goal is when my passion and purpose and the work that people value, will pay me to do are almost one thing. And so the whole idea of Ikigai and this, what is your passion? What will the world pay you for? That circle, I was like, oh, I really, really like this approach of thinking about things. And let's just keep pushing them together so that I can get there. It's a journey. I'm still working towards it.
Well, you've launched 100 allies. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Oh, goodness. 100 allies is like my whole life. So when I say it's my whole life, and that's why I describe it as it's a journey, my life, where I will continue. I'm someone who is unable to see a problem that connects with me and where I think I have a solution that can be applied, and then I walk away from it and I'm passive. Of course, I manage my energy, so I don't take on more than I can chew, or at least I try not to. 100 Allies is I guess, in the simplest way of describing it, our mission is to lift everyone towards leadership. And it's really about turning potential into success. And it's built around, so again, I always say, diversity is not just how it looks, it's how decisions are made. So this whole focus on how leaders are made, especially in an industry like the one I'm in, which is a consumer and a people industry, where actually to lead and build businesses effectively, you need to have a strong cognitive sense of your consumers. And so for me, because I wear all these different hats and I've come to beauty by way of engineering, accounting, investment banking, so there are lots of, I'm also an immigrant, right? So I came from Nigeria and I moved to the UK almost 24 years ago. So my perspectives and intersectionality is so unique. And so 6 years ago, in the way I came, I was like, that fresh perspective in this industry that I found and I love, I was like, look, I observed that it seems to me like a lot of companies have the same blind spot. The consumer is evolving. They all want to grow, yet they're sleeping on lots and lots of opportunity. And mostly because the people who actually know how to unlock the opportunity authentically were often not in the business, in the wrong role, or unsupported and quietly quitting. And I was like, this is ridiculous, right? You're missing out on business opportunity from this very homogeneous. And so that's where 100 Allies was born from. I was like, look, because of my intersectionality and also because of the experience that I came with, which is as a woman from a lower socioeconomic background, a woman of color, I've navigated many lonely spaces. And there were some strategies that accidentally, and this is what I love about my life, is so many things organically have happened and have taught me. And so accidentally, there was some sponsorship, executive coaching, the power of believing in someone's potential as being things that really allow people that you might not ordinarily code to be successful, to show some element of what potential can look like, that power of believing. And so that's really what we're doing in 100 Allies. I know that there are lots of unseen talent in our industry and people who have ambitions. And was like, look, we can scale opportunity and actually it drives growth. And that for me is a mission I'm excited about.
Well, congratulations. It's huge. You've mentioned lots of the pros about having a portfolio career, but what are the cons? What are the negatives?
Oh.
Are there any?
There are.
Oh, nothing's perfect. I think we should be honest about that.
No, absolutely. So I think for me, the biggest one, it's that feeling sometimes of starting again.
That new girl at school feeling of, we're back at the bottom.
It really is, and it has been, but it's also, again, it's driven a lot of growth because I've had to figure out how I make it work. But hey ho, growth tends to come on the other side, so I embrace it. So it's again the same, like in a new space, right? Whereas in finance and investment banking, in the way I was doing it, I had established networks. I had built the judgment muscle, right? So there were lots and lots of things that suddenly I find myself in this new world. Let's take entrepreneurship, my journey as a founder, because everything I was doing was me. Everything was like, oh God. And so again, it made me really, really hyper focus on the things that help me in surrounding myself with really experienced people, really talented people. And in a way, we talked about 100 allies, but it's so linked because in that search for how do I build that network that allows me to almost complement this lack of muscle, which now has developed massively. I'm not where I was. I have more established networks, but there are still moments where I still feel quite new. But again, I'm someone who really thrives on learning. I think my worst situation is when it's stagnated. I will add a
Yeah.
new project, and sometimes that's what these new projects are. It's a way of staying constantly innovative, feeling fulfilled.
You get a bit addicted to that high of, oh, I didn't know I could do that, and now I can. What else? And my team, we're our own worst enemies. We're like, we're just going to redesign the website because we don't know how, and it's going to take some time. It's going to make our brains hurt. And they actually have said to me, I need another brain hurt project. I was like, I love this. Okay, let's think of something. But I definitely hit that in sort of year 2, year 3, where the learning curve at the beginning had been like this. It's like, I don't know how to build a website. I don't know how to use Xero. I don't know how to negotiate terms. All of that initial lovely admin setup stuff had been done. And I'm like, now what? Like, I kind of miss the learning curve and the trajectory. And then, you expand the business and you change the business and you do things differently. And you become an addict to that in a good way, I think, because then you're growing and learning.
Absolutely. But we come back to that thing we talked about at the beginning, self-mastery. So in this, allowing myself the freedom to experiment, but still fail fast, I'm also learning because I came in with a lot of assumptions around what entrepreneurship looked like, around who I am as a worker. I wanted all this autonomy. But actually, I learned that there were aspects of the previous work that were extremely important around how I'm effective. I really bounce off having smart people sharing ideas. You said you learn from speaking. I learn from actually teaching and socializing the things I'm working on with people. But the other aspect of mastery, I also understood that there were certain things I thought I was like, I'm crap at that. I have zero business doing that. So actually now in sort of thinking about teams and people who complement my own superpower, I'm understanding where my strengths lie with more clarity. Yeah. So I can really like hone in and try and choose those all the time. But the ability to now bring in really smart people around me, people who are smarter than me, who are better, more qualified, etc., which allow us to move faster. It's incredible.
And it's totally okay and a very good thing for any founder to recognize what they're not good at, because if they try and be good at something that's not flowing and not comfortable, don't do it. It's just, you waste time and you go down a rabbit hole where you're just feeling frustrated. So yes, there's some things learning the hard way, and there's other things actually you're better off asking an expert.
Indeed. A friend of mine said something. He's an investor, very experienced investor, and he was like, I'm going to tell you what my number one sign of a good founder is the best founders I've seen are able to delegate very important things. And I was like, okay, that will be a goal.
Yes.
Let's get delegating away. But it
and
really
important
does
things. Yeah. And risky, chunky things that have meaning, and it's fine to delegate stationary order, but I actually quite like doing that. But the really big things. So when Francesca and my team's like, I'd like to redesign the website, which is our home, people discover us through that. I was like, great. And her and Sam have rewritten it, designed it all themselves. And I looked at it and like, great, signed off. And they're like, what? I was like, trust you, you know it better than I do. Brilliant. It was thrilling to see how good they were at this. And I was like, you're better at it than I am now. Fantastic. One thing I wanted to ask you is about time, in the sense that it is so precious. It is finite. How do you manage your time, and how do you compartmentalize those different roles that you have in your career? Do you have hacks, or is it just natural to you?
Time is extremely important, right? You've just said it. It's the most precious asset that we that. So I think it's really essential to manage it wisely and avoid wasting. I keep coming back to energy, right? And so how do I manage that? I create structures. Again, as an entrepreneur, you do have to create structures that just allow you to help manage things. So like I just said, for me, continuous learning and it's so important in how I grow, develop, especially in the world we live in that's constantly evolving. And in my industry, and where I regularly read trend reports, informed reports, they stay up to speed. I try and surround myself with a lot of inspiration. So I talk to people who I learn from constantly, who inspire me. They're the ones I follow on social media. I've done a lot of auditing, I think, in the pandemic of things that really wasted my energy or depleted me.
Love an audit.
No, but it really is, because I realized, and it's almost the energy hack for me was, I started actually keeping a little diary of how my engagements, especially my most frequent engagements, made me feel. And I started to see patterns. I could see that there were actually some spaces that I was in that didn't fill my cup. And I was just like, actually, we need to spend less time in those environments. And so I think I've just been gradually moving into high vibration. And I'm already a very optimistic can-do. So I kind of was like, yeah, where am I trying? Let's just go find them. The world is already hard enough. It's already ugly enough. I'm not really a moaner. Of course, everybody needs to make space for letting stuff off. But I'm more of a, okay, and so then what's the action? So I was just like, I kind of want to be with those people who are much more, let's just get on with it. We can drive change in our own little way. So that for me is really important. I think we already talked about energy management. And there's one more I think that's extremely important, which is actually embracing the discomfort. So in terms of how I work, let's look at everything as a spectrum, right? I'm much more naturally in the more introverted end. Over time, as an entrepreneur, I didn't plan it, but I was like, I'm going to have to do things that I do not love: public speaking, going out networking,
Your
all
own
of
PR.
these things.
Yeah.
Like talking on LinkedIn, I was like, kill me now. So,
don't worry. My team made me turn the camera on about 2 years ago for the podcast. I'm like, don't make me do that. It's like, no, we need your face on Instagram. I'm like, oh God, okay, fine.
Doing Instagram lives, I was like, goodness, I do not enjoy it, but I've done it. And again, one of the things I realized is from doing the uncomfortable things, the only way, it's like exercise, the only way to get better is keep doing it. And when I do it, I don't know, it's not even a stress. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And I've built that muscle. And I was like, but now it's an additional skill that I can turn to. Of course, I manage it, right? But even when I go to big networking things, I have to contain my energy. But even in those spaces, I very quickly gravitate to the conversations that fill my cup. I like to be inspired. I like to learn from people, right? I don't really do gossiping or any of those productive type things. So I find myself in those spaces looking for those pools, but still navigating. And I'm high energy anyway. So I think I also energize spaces I'm in anyways.
Well, 100%. You've just reminded me where we met, and it was the British Beauty Council breakfast when they were launching this year's September event. You were incredible because you were what I'm normally at those events going, oh, hi, you do this. You need to meet this person. I've just met her. And it was live LinkedIn that you were managing within, I'd met 15 people within 20 minutes through you that I had just met myself. It was incredible, but you could see that energy and everyone was attracted to it because you were like ding, 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 dot connecting, fixing people's problems. And it was amazing. So you found your calling.
I don't know, but like I said, I think I work better when I really enjoy what I do. So
yeah. And I think that's something I didn't realize. I worked 20 years for other people that I was good at and I was doing well at, and I never questioned it because it's what I did. And I found myself redundant. I was like, if I'm really honest, I didn't really love it. And I'm so much more me now than I was before. And I'm so grateful for the redundancy because I would never have left. And I think being in that rut of being told what to do and just assuming that's all you're capable of is normal. Like, why would you question it? But now having that freedom of thought and that freedom of like, well, no, I don't want to work in a corporate office 5 days a week, and I want to be able to work and travel and whatever else it might be that has value to you. And I think we're lucky coming into this later in our careers because we've had experience from other companies of how not to do it. And it's interesting seeing entrepreneurs in their early 20s because I feel like they haven't worked out that well, don't do it that way, don't do it that way. They're just going in, I'm going to try it this way. So I'm grateful for that experience, but I don't think I'll be going back anytime soon.
Oh God, you've just nailed it. And I think this is actually something that I found is very common among women. Like we become more confident later in our lives because we also have a lot of evidence, right? The self-doubt
Yeah,
that takes up
that
space in
proven
the
track
younger
record of
years.
success. Yeah.
Exactly. Is this a swearing show? I saw there's this Nigerian author called Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and I saw a little snip recently that she was sharing. She's the same age as me, or maybe just a year older. And she was like, you know what happened when I got older? I looked into the bag of fucks and there weren't just any. She was like, of fucks to give, that's it. And she was just
Yeah.
like, there weren't any left. So she was just like, I'm just living my life. And again, I think it's a really neat way of, again, coming back to the self mastery. I think if you know who you are, you can, again, just manage so many other things around you. You can create spaces that work for you. You can communicate even to your teams. When we think about the most effective leaders, actually, when I start to break it down, the most effective leaders have a high sense of self-awareness and awareness of others. Because again, when you know yourself, it's almost like listening, active listening. You're more able then to observe what's around you and notice what needs to shift into where, and you're not worrying too much about your ego, etc. And you can better serve the world around you without depleting yourself. And that is, I think, a really powerful thing that I think more people need to focus on. But again, when I think about the luck I have, and I think I hear this with you two, Juliet, is that we've been able to, and it's a fortunate, not everyone has this, but being able to make space in our lives to at least go on that journey of self-discovery and mastery. And it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
We keep learning, but it's definitely worth it in my opinion.
100%. And there's no end to it. I think that's the other thing is like people like chasing something. And it's like, no one's going to come around and pat you on the back and go, you've made it. As long as you're in that. And I've been very bad at being present in the now and appreciating the journey. And I'm constantly trying to fix a problem. But actually, I fixed that IT problem today, or that was a really annoying glitch on the website, but that's now overcome. Like the little things and celebrating those successes of go us, we did that. And being proud of it, because you are going to be thrown a million different obstacles, some big, some small, but that's part of it. And that's so exciting. Someone said to me, oh, you've been under a lot of waves, but you've learned how to swim really strong and you can get through them. And I was like, oh, yes, I'm a strong swimmer, finally.
No, I like that. I like that. I can't swim to save my life. I've tried many times. I was like, okay.
Career-wise, you're fine, I think. Do you have any tips and tricks around your prioritization of tasks? Because in my old career, it was just he who shouts loudest. And now I'm like, no, it needs to be, yes, I've got 10 emails that could be replied to in half an hour, but actually I'm better off spending an hour proactively doing something that hasn't been started yet. So how do you work all that out for yourself?
I think with me, I'm quite organized and highly productive. And also, let me give credit where it's due. I come from a background of investment banking and M&A, which has always been transactional. So you move from one deal to the next deal to the next deal. Sometimes you're doing multiple deals at once. They're very complex. It requires a lot of project management. And the banker is basically like the chief manager of the whole deal because we have the most to lose outside of the client if it doesn't complete. So I would say that I sort of built that muscle there of around being organized, but also, and I create my own structure. So I put in deadlines sometimes where I can see 100 allies is a good example, right? Because it's a mission. You can be very in your head, but I do put, all right, so this is the deadline. I communicate it to people so that they hold me accountable. I'm sort of a good girl in that way.
Yeah.
And so I will deliver on it as soon as something happens. It goes straight in my diary once I make a commitment. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Deadlines and prioritization, my non-exec work, luckily, the base commitment is you're going to attend this many meetings and you're going to have to read papers beforehand. This is scheduled well in advance. So I can also schedule time to look at the papers, etc. And I just continue sort of with those sorts of hacks. And then, but again, all of this is managed around the energy points that I came to, which is just managing it a little bit. And one last thing as well, that I would say around prioritization, I think it's also a journey, right? So I would say that early in my beauty journey, where I was really in high learning mode, and I was saying yes to asking, like, comment, da, 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 da. And so again, but that was necessary. So I would say that the boundaries and the prioritization, etc., around there were slightly more loose. But then from watching my energy, I can see where I'm like getting close to burnout. And I was like, okay, now it's time to put some boundaries in place. I'll give you an example. I love meeting new founders. I love hearing about innovation. I love hearing about who's breaking things and rebuilding them in more efficient ways. I could spend all week just talking to people and learning what, like, AI is my new pet project. It's like, what? It's like wild. But one of the ways I was like, I can't do that. So again, structure looks like Friday afternoons, 30-minute slots. And if you come into my existence, let's find a window there. And that's when that happens. So it's just a very practical example of how I still find that mix. And another one I do is Mondays. For example, my Mondays, I typically don't put meetings in there because it's my one day.
No meeting Monday.
Exactly. I don't know where I saw this. I'm pretty sure I didn't come up with this.
So money aside, what does success look like to you?
That's a really big question, isn't it? But it's also easy for me, right? Because it's sort of where this journey started. It's really about impact. It's about whose life I've changed as a result of my and how I've made the world a better place. My portfolio journey began with the goal of sort of aligning more purpose and meaning into my work. So success is about building something that really feels aligned with those values and drives that purpose. And so again, I'm on the path of sort of creating that, or I want to have led a meaningful life, but also I want to create wealth around what I do. So again, managing those two is an aspiration.
To be able to put people and planet above profit, and there's no shame in profit. You can do more good work if you've got a successful business to help that work happen. So yeah, it's really interesting. And what would your question be for the next guest?
So I think my question, recently I was on a chat and someone asked something. In the world we're in today, we often focus on big systemic problems. But what is one small action or contribution that you could regularly make to improve a mission that's important to you or to the world? And what's that one thing was actually the question.
I've invented a job for myself. Like, I'm good. It's okay. But seeing the business world from those two lenses, a lot of people are like, well, how many people do you employ? And what's your turnover? And are you going to exit? And these big ticket things that define success. And for me, it's like, I like going to work every day and I can change my commute if I want. And there's little things that have a big impact. And it's those little things that all add up to, is your brain happy? Are you living a healthy lifestyle? Are your team happy? Are your clients happy? Like, those small things, I think, are so much more important than the big ones, or they feed the big ones.
I'm going to flip this to how, say, practically for me, that plays out, because it's something I'm doing now. So I live in a world, because of where I'm a female entrepreneur, I work in finance. I'm often seeing this, oh God, female entrepreneurs, there's no funding available. Like, life is so hard in the early stages when you're building. There's no capital, there's no resources, there's no. And I was like, these are all big problems, right? So when it's like so big, how do you even grapple how you think about addressing it? And actually, the reflection for me was like, but there are actually practical steps, right, that we can take. So if you say you care about female entrepreneurship, friggin' buy from female entrepreneurs, right? So it was like, let that be your one action or motivation. I then, in fact, more recently, my last LinkedIn post was extending this a little bit. I found myself, I'm an M&A advisor, but I've also been on the bootstrap solopreneur journey. I understand how immensely difficult and how little love, and that also fuels my passion, there is in that early. It's still risky. You haven't found product market fit. So people don't quite love you naturally yet. I was like, a lot of founders would come to me in this sort of distress moment. I've been building my business for a few years. I'm now tired. It's not working. I need to look after my own mental health. And I would give a little bit of advice, but I was like, look, the challenge is, small businesses like this are not good bets for me as a a businesswoman who needs to make a living to take on. So as much emotional and empathy I have for the situation, I just can't be, because also my fees, you just can't clear it. Even if you took any money out of this, you're going to hand it all to me. Ethically, that is a bit problematic for me. So I found myself saying no, but giving a little bit of advice. So I won't leave you at nothing, or I'll direct you in. So one of the things I recently reflected on, again, because there was another instance of this, I was like, well, I could create an ebook, right, where I put some nuggets down that are applicable to this group, where at least as a first step, because most people think I find a buyer, but I was like, no, find a buyer is only one step. It's like one step, and not even the most freaking important one, actually, in how you sell your business. And so I was like, okay, I have all this knowledge, I can put this down. So I did this little campaign on where I was like, look, if I get 100 people email me and say that they care, because I'm not going to do it if no one cares. And I'm not on any savior type mission. And so if 100 people email me and tell me they care, I will take the time now to create this book as a little manual. And I priced it at £100, right? Just to put this in context, my usual fee is like 3,000 times. So I'm not like trying to like over profit from this, but at least it's accessible. And I was like, that is a one little thing that I'm doing to actually combat this barrier of financial barrier to financial inclusion of SMEs who I'm a part of that community. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So when I said what's your little thing, it's almost in that same, because we moan a lot about all the problems of the world. But I think if we start to enter into that, I can be part of the solution mindset, it's quite transformational.
I love that. Thank you so much, Nnenna. I've learned so much, and always a joy chatting to you.
And you too. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed this chat.
I really hope you've enjoyed this conversation. You can find a recap of all the advice so kindly shared by our guest in the show notes, along with their contact details. We'd love it if you could rate and review or share this podcast, because it really does help other people discover it. To incentivise this a little, I would very happily offer you one of our PR guides on how to share editorial coverage legally. Just DM us or send us an email, hello@fallowfieldmason.com, with review in the title, and we'll share it on.